All right, so let's make a formal introduction for our listeners. Good afternoon, Phil. My name is Claudio, and I'm calling you from Washington, D.C. From the studio of Fairfax City, we are very humble and grateful that Phil Manzanera accepted our invitation to the show. Phil, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thank you for having me on your show from Washington. Fantastic.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. Let's go back to the beginning. Were you born in a musical family? And how old were you when you perhaps began taking, piano lesson or guitar lesson? Let's go back to the beginning.
I was born in London to a Colombian mother from Barranquilla and a British father. I would say my mother had music in her because in her, my DNA from Latino music comes from her. But she started having guitar. We went to live in Havana, Cuba, in 1957, and she started having guitar lessons when I was 6 years old. And then she got fed up with me touching her guitar all the time and said, I'm going to have to teach you a little bit, otherwise you're going to drive me crazy. So she started teaching me acompañamiento to accompanying chords and things like picking and playing chords to Latino songs, evergreen songs that you hear now still. You probably know the words, although actually eventually it became Cuando salí de Cuba, Ese lunar que tiene cielito lindo, all those kind of songs. So that guitar, which I still have, 1957 Havana, that's what I started on. I didn't start on anything to do with rock and roll or anything like that. It was all Latino stuff. And so obviously the music in Cuba was incredible. And as a little boy, I was taken to asleep most of the time, to the Tropicana Club, to all the Sanssouci clubs like that, where my parents wanted to party, but they had to take along the little boy, and he could fall asleep at the table and then put him in the car or whatever. So that's when I first became interested in music. And so then after the revolution, we had to leave and we went to Hawaii for a year, and then Hawaiian music, and then to Caracas, Venezuela.
Yeah.
And then I kept going to Colombia because I have like 60 cousins in Colombia, a big family, and some of them were musical. And in a little village, well, it's a little town called Girardot, which is straight down from Bogota. One of my uncles lived, and I remember sitting on a dirt road with my cousins, and they were playing a tiple. So my uncle said, should we buy a tiple? So we went to a little casita and up concrete thing, and there were the bodies of the tiple, and they said, choose a body, and then they string it up for you. And so I had a tiple. And so one of my cousins played jazz piano, eventually went to New York and played jazz. So there was a bit of music around all the time. But then I heard rock and roll music, and I heard it from the radio, listening to London on the BBC World Service, and I saw it in films, Elvis Presley films, and American college kids who'd come out to Venezuela for vacations would play at parties, and they would play Buddy Holly and things like that. So me and my Venezuelan friends could see how all the girls in our class were looking at these boys, and so we said, we got to get electric guitars. Me and my friend Miguel Sanchez Vegas, we got to get guitars, electric guitars. We got to learn how to play. We'll get girls. Terrible, really. And so that's why I became loco about pop music, rock music. You could get a few things there: the Shadows, Cliff Richard, Jerry and the Pacemakers, whatever. But I said to my parents, send me to England, to boarding school. I was age 9. I want to go to England. They sent me to boarding school in South London, and the 6th, in September 1960. So I was there at the prime time for rock and roll, and everything happened. The Beatles, the Stones, everything that happened in England in the 60s just went into my brain, and I became mad about pop music, rock music, guitars, amplifiers.
Yeah, right. So I know that you attended the Dulwich College in Southeast London, and
yeah,
make a big impact. Feel free to. All my questions, Phil, are open-ended. So I'm like a psychologist. Yeah. I'm here to listen. So so you begin hanging out with a lot of very good friends and kids like Bill and
McCormick,
Hayward, and so on.
Charles Hayward. That's right, and they were good friends, and they ended up being very good musicians. And we had a school band, and then they were Bill mother knew Robert Wyatt's mother. Robert Wyatt was in a band called Soft Machine, and they were one of the coolest bands with early Pink Floyd in London during psychedelia and all this. And so also David Bowie was starting out near Dulwich at Beckenham, and people would come back to school in the morning and say, oh, we saw this guy who's playing at the pub called David Bowie, and he's really good. So, we had our ear to the ground, and we felt close to people who were in bands. And then when I was 16, my brother took me to meet a friend of his who just joined a band to ask him how to become a professional musician. And like the week before, he had just joined a band, and that was David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. So, when you're young, I was 16, if you can meet somebody who is successful when you're young, you as a mentor almost, you can actually believe that you too could be successful or in the music business. And it's so important for young people to have mentors or people they look up to. And it's important for older musicians to help out younger musicians or give them advice. Of course, he can't remember what he said to me. Although actually I was having dinner with him on Saturday. He said, I think you owe me 20% of everything you've earned, because whatever advice I gave you must have been good, because 5 years later, you managed to join Roxy Music.
Absolutely. And then was, you were turning, finishing the equivalent of high school here. You were telling your parents, man, I like music. Was any pressure, a family pressure to say, hey, forget about music. It's a crazy life. You're not going to make any money. Go to school, go the easy way, enroll in college, or.
Yeah. But my father died in Venezuela when I was 15. So my poor mother was sort of, she didn't really know what rock music was. She knew about cumbia, salsa. And I said, I want to be a pop musician. She said, what's that? I said, don't worry about it. It's be all right. And that's where my brother said, look, let's go and talk to this guy. Ask him what you have to do to become a professional musician. But I said to her, look, I'm going to try it out. I'll apply to university, but if something happens, I'll only go to university, give me more years to try and get into a band. And I just got lucky.
Well, I don't know if it's luck or good. You were talented to begin with, I suppose, right? So Gabriel Emerald or Roxy and all the playbook that you pay later on in life. Yeah, help your career, but you did have it in you, I think, right? So.
Well, I was just so lucky to meet those people at that time in my life. It was fate, just complete accident. It's like, people say accident of birth. You're in the right place at the right time. You know, I joined on a week after my 21st birthday. On my 21st birthday, I had nothing. I was looking into the abyss. I had no band, nothing. My other friends had joined other bands. I had nothing. And then a week later, I re-auditioned for Brian Ferry, Brian Eno, Andy Mackay, Paul Thompson. They said, "Do you want to join?" The week after that, I joined. And then we signed the contract the week after that with the management. And then 6 weeks later, I did 3 gigs. We were in the studio recording the first album.
Yeah.
And the album came out on the same day as David Bowie's album, with Spiders from Mars, you know, that album. And he saw us and we supported him and he loved us. And we were a hit.
Before we go into Roxy Music, it was another important band that you formed, like a progressive rock quartet, Quiet Sun. And
yes, well, with my school friends, Charles Hayward and Bill McCormick, and we auditioned a keyboard player who out of all the people who could have joined, it turned out to be somebody who had been at our school. It was older than us. We had no idea. And we formed this band called Quiet Sun, which couldn't get a recording contract. But 5 years after Roxy, we recorded a Quiet Sun album. And that has been very popular and was the basis of the 801 Live project, actually, later. But those that kind of music, well, it's sort of progressive. It wasn't really like prog rock like Genesis. It was more like trying to copy Soft Machine, the first Soft Machine. Yeah. And it still sounds good. In fact, about 9 months ago, I was listening to radio's BBC Six Music here on a Sunday night. I was doing some cooking, and the guy said, "And our record of the week is Mainstream by Quiet Sun." And I thought, I quickly text the other, Bill and Charles and everything. I said, 45 years later, we're actually on the radio. Wow. It's a special featured album. I can't believe it. It still sounds terrific. So, I'm very proud of that album. And, that both Bill and Charles, they came to the last Roxy gig I did here in London, the O2, So we're still friends.
Yeah, good for you. And then, Roxy Music came to the picture with of course, Brian Ferry, Brian Eno, and Paul Thompson, Andy Mackay, and those are big names. And at the time, you guys were a kid, 21, 22 years old, whatever. And then, you ever thought that you guys will become that popular, down the road? Or what was the motivation to form Roxy Music to begin with?
Well, obviously I joined late, didn't I? A year after they'd really started forming.
Yeah.
And, they were clever guys. I knew when I first met them that they were special. And I was just thrilled to be in a professional band, quite frankly. I had no thoughts about what might happen in the future. And no bands did in those days. You joined the band almost like joining the Navy or something to see the world. And you just expected it was only going to last a year or 2 years. You never expected it to be, here we are 50 years later. That's just like ridiculous, really. So you just live in the moment. It really was, But luckily, that every moment was exciting. And more and more people said they liked us. And so it was just incredibly exciting. You're on the journey and you didn't look back. You just kept looking forward. And, we were suddenly successful. We were different. We when we came to America in that first year, around Christmas time, 72. And thinking that we would be immediately successful in America, and we weren't. People found us too weird, and people threw stuff at us.
Really?
Like water bombs. I always remember there was a gig in Fresno. We were supporting Carlos Santana's brother called Jorge Santana, and it was called Malo, their band. And I always remember some guys shouting, "Get off stage, you faggots," and throwing stuff at us. And we just kept on playing. So we're going to play this music, whatever you throw at us, it doesn't matter. We're playing, it was a bit like prog rock then, actually. But they just couldn't handle, the way we looked and the music that was coming out. And, so that was, we realized how difficult it would be to try and make it in America. And it was all very big. We've been playing pubs and clubs in England, and maybe some small theaters, but it was like, wow, welcome to the real world. It's like this is big time in America, and we're just like little people. So, but it didn't worry us. We went back to England and got on with recording the next album, then the next album, and then the next album, and tour. And we did a lot of hard work for many years, because that's what you had to do. And we loved doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you guys were playing, touring, and then I think what happened between 76 and 78 that you guys all started stop. You were doing your own thing. You end up releasing your first record, I suppose, and you get to a point as a band that, hey, we need to, not break the band, but split for a while, do our own thing, and then come back.
Well, I wish it was as planned as that, but it wasn't. It was like, after about 5 albums, so in 1975, by 1975, we'd recorded 5 albums, 5 hit albums. And I think, we had the opportunity to do solo albums as well. So we had 5 Roxy albums, and we had maybe each had about 3 solo albums as well. I mean, I can't believe that we did so much work, all of us, the whole time we were working. And then it was, I think Brian really decided that he wanted to have a break, but he didn't tell us, of course. But I think he wanted to try and make it on his own. And he moved to America. He moved to LA, and he had a very glamorous girlfriend, Jerry Hall, and it all seemed to be, going well. And as always, we just got on with our own solo things and just followed our nose. And that's when I did the thing with Eno, the 801 Live project, which was only designed to last 6 weeks. And it was an experiment in putting people who are very interested in technical side of music together with people who are non-musicians, and putting them in a room and seeing what came out of it if they battled away. And we created something that was pretty unique, still sounds great today, but we only did 3 gigs. 1 was recorded, and that's been probably the most successful solo project that I've ever been involved in. And of course, we had one of the most famous drummers now of old Simon Phillips on drums, and he was like 18 at the time, and after that concert, he got offers from Jagger, from Jeff Beck, from just so many people, and has played with so many famous people. And, the rest of us there was a black blues player, there was Eno, there was me, there was a technically brilliant pianist who had been in a band called Sky, Francis Monkman.
Yeah.
And it was an incredibly intense period of 6 weeks. The concerts, and then boof, that was it, disappeared. But Eno went off to work with Bowie pretty much for the rest of his life.
Yeah, that was the band 800 101. So it's a big name there. Lloyd and Francis, Brian Eno, Bill, Simon, Phil. Yeah, I interviewed Simon, and I'm going to be interviewing Francis shortly. And it's the best of the best, man. And Simon was a kid. Was like 17, 18 years old.
18, that's right. And I mean, Bill McCormick, the bass player, who doesn't play now because he has some illness in his hands. I mean, so many bass players now cite that album and his bass playing on it. Well, the rhythm section of the two of them, because Bill came from the Jack Bruce school of bass players, and he had played with Robert Wyatt on his solo stuff, Matching Mole, anyway, as well as being in Quiet Sun and stuff. So it was an absolutely terrific band, and it was a magical moment that was captured, luckily, on vinyl. And so that was really, I don't know what kind of music you'd call that. It was such a mixture of stuff. It's not really prog, but it has got elements of prog rock in it. But it's just, well, I'm speechless. I can't even say, I can't work it out. But there's lots of nice reviews where they explain it.
You play with Brian Eno on a couple albums too. Like Here Come the Warm Jet and
yes,
Mountain by Tragic. So you have a
I co-produced that Taking Tiger Mountain, and worked on that, and a couple of tracks on Another Green World. And then he played on a lot of my solo stuff over the years. And of course, he's 10 minutes from me here, as is Brian Ferry 10 minutes from me here. And as is Mandy Mackay 10 minutes from me. So we're all here. We're all doing music, which is wonderful to think that 50 years later, we're still all doing new stuff. And in fact, I'm doing an album with Andy, instrumental album, right now. And so we continue. This is what we do. We make music. And luckily, because of the ways the industry's changed, we don't have to go and ask permission. We can just do it like anyone else. Just put it out ourselves. Right. And it's it's just it's what we do in life, and so I mean, that whole period, I did a lot of producing, and John Cale. I worked with Nico. I'd have to have a look at a list. I did so
I play with everybody. One of the other great collaborations that you have was with the album L with Godley and Creme. Cream, and feel free to elaborate. I think use a particular approach in the creation of the song, as in Brasilia, but feel free to elaborate on what.
Well, that was actually in the period after 801 and before we got back together with Roxy. Kevin Godley was my next door neighbor, and they just left NCC, and him and Lowell were partners working and stuff, and they said, "Do you want to form a band?" I said, "Well, yeah, why not?" So we started doing an album together, and eventually Brian Ferry rang up and said, "Can we get Roxy back together again?" I said, "Well, I've just started another band." And he said, "Well, you could do both." I said, "Oh yeah, okay." Of course I couldn't do both, because we ended up doing a lot of the rock stuff in New York. So Kevin and Lowell then changed the name of the album, and it became the Godley and Creme album, and some of the stuff. But we did some. They were great, very talented people, and when I say we wrote stuff together. We didn't really. We said, look, let's have an experiment where each of us goes into the studio for 2 hours, does whatever they want, and the next person goes in for 2 hours, do whatever, but not listening to what the other person did. And then the next person. So then we all come together at the end, and then we put up the faders, see what kind of monster we've created. So that track was done, and then we started crafting it and stuff. But it was, they're great. These are art school kids who went to art school, and they were, like trained to work in different ways from just normal musicians.
Yeah. Kevin is, I interviewed him a couple of times, and he's a very nice guy. I never met Lowell.
No.
I think they grew apart a little bit. I don't know if they're talking to one another anymore, but whatever. Who I am to criticize, any musician. But they were, as after 10cc or in between 10cc, they formed a great partnership, and they did videos when with MTV at the way, and they were way ahead of the times in many ways. Like
way ahead of the time.
Yeah,
way ahead of the time.
Another monster that had vision. That he so gave it. Godley and Lowell Green was amazing duo, and.
Well, I remember when they were doing videos, and Kevin used to do some of the editing at home next door. I mean, I went down and I watched the Police video for Every Breath You Take. That's right. In the when he was editing it there, which is an incredible video and an incredible song, such a hit everywhere.
Yeah.
And those guys are just so talented. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, amazing. So then, your buddies from Roxy Music call you back. Hey, let's put the band together, and then you begin, recording again, touring again, and you guys did very well. Feel free to elaborate.
Well, then we lasted another 5 years. It seems like 5-year little bursts of 5 years, and then everyone gets fed up. And then stops. And then, so there's the first 5 years, then there's 2 years off for good behavior, then there's 5 years again, and then there's 18 years off for bad behavior. And then we get back together again in 2001 for 5 years, and then everyone wants to kill each other. And then we get back together after the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, do that, and then this tour that we've just done, celebrating the 50th anniversary. So, there is a pattern of, and what is, obviously, if I went into more detail, we'd be here for like 3 or 4 hours, everyone would go to sleep. But normally, what happens is that bands will stop playing and never work together again. For some extraordinary reason, after we get fed up with each other, we forget why we got fed up with each other. And then we ring each other up and say, do you fancy doing something? I said, oh, yeah, great. And they said, why did we get fed up with each other? I can't remember. Okay, let's continue.
maybe that, I was thinking like in real life, maybe you in a partnership, matrimony, husband and wife, whatever, maybe that's a good element to do it, because you can love one another. You sign a contract. You marry for the rest of my life. You have kids, and things don't work out as supposed to. The BCP that you are 5 years, you sort of split up for 3 years. You rather saying, "Hey, man, I miss you guys. I have some idea. Let's get together and play. Get together for another 5 years." And maybe that's not very healthy. So,
well, it's you could call it healthy, or you could call it dysfunctional. Depends what your attitude's like. But we are now getting to the real latter end of our lives. So I don't know how long this can continue like this, but the great thing is that we did that tour in September, and we managed to do it, and we enjoyed it a lot, and I think the audience enjoyed it, and we acquitted ourselves well. And so it's very satisfying that we did that. Who knows what might happen in the future? But I'm so pleased that we did that tour in America.
Yeah, it was. I was. You play here in DC, and I saw you like 3 times there in different cities. And when we meet you in a couple of weeks in London, I will show you some pictures that I took.
Oh, great!
You were like, so welcome to be a surprise. As opposed to other bands like Genesis, Peter Gabriel left. He wanted to do his own thing, and they like one another, but they're not going back. The Led Zeppelin guys split up, and they don't talk to one another. The Pink Floyd guys, they split up. They're on their way. It's difficult. I mean, I suppose it's difficult to be with the same group of 5 guys for 3 years, in and out in their own house, doing their own thing, argument to one another. You fly with them, you tour with them, you take the bus, go to the same hotel. It gets old at the beginning. You may like one another, but it's little thing bother you more than when you are, I don't know, 40, 50 or 60, whatever.
70.
Yeah, so it's part of life, I suppose. What many people say, why great bands split up? It's a lot of money to be made, and that's not about the money anymore. Like the Pink Floyd, they have offered them so much money. Led Zeppelin guy so much money. The Peter Gabriel has so much money to go back to Well, it's not just the money. They have done well when they sell. So it's right. So.
Yeah, that is true. You can't go into the music for money. You've got to do music because you love music and you want to make music, regardless of whether you're successful or not. And it's a terrible problem for young musicians, especially now, because to earn money. Because of the way the paradigm of the music business has changed so much. And, so I think for the future of bands and music, unless there's a radical change, it's a big problem. Everyone wants music. Everyone needs music. Not everyone wants to pay for it. So another system needs to be worked out. And I think there was an announcement from the head of Universal a few weeks ago acknowledging the fact that there needs to be a new way of paying musicians for streaming, because the way it's set up, only the people at the top take all the money, and a band who has maybe 10,000 streams cannot earn anything, anyway, enough money to even pay for their rent and so it needs to be recalibrated, all the deals. So it's a business thing that needs to be sorted. Otherwise, there's no future for young people to do music. I mean, people will always try and do music. Luckily, you can do stuff at home on computers and things, but it's, compared to other jobs, if you like, there's just everything stacked against young people making a living. So that is something that a lot of the older musicians have made clear and have said this, but it's, as always, the history of the business of music shows us that they always come out on top compared to the artist. So
if Roxy Music or I don't know, King Crimson put a new record on there, okay, they figured out, okay, it's going to cost us between the recording, the engineering, remastering, put out there whatever, $100,000, just to give a number, right? So how are we going to invest? Well, people don't buy. I do, but not everybody buy a lot of CDs, a lot of vinyl. Everybody wants it for free. Okay, so how we record that investment? Well, we need to tour. We end up recording a band selling T-shirts. So we need to tour to sell T-shirt or autograph or a signed poster or a picture or meet and greet. So those elements have nothing to do with music. It have to do with merchandising more than selling the record, right? So is that's the way with cell phone and access to technology and Spotify, that we have evolved, right? So as a musician, you get paid 0.004 cents every time a stream from Roxy Music is listened down there in Spotify or something. So it's tough, and the owner of Spotify make all the money, right? So it trickles down little by little to the musician, the pennies, So
that's right, and obviously, you need what you need is legislation.
Yeah.
Government is to stop that.
Yeah.
And or to make it more equitable. And the only way it can be done is through legislation. And of course, it's in a queue with hundreds of other things to do with legislation. So I don't know what the solution is. But anyway, half the solution to a problem is recognizing there is a problem. So hopefully we keep on about it, mentioning it to people. And because, music is just good for the brain. We know that there's a health reason to listen to music. It helps with so many things, and you could just see when people go to concerts, the resonance. They remember. I'm the same. You remember where you were when you first heard a track that you love,
of course,
and it has wonderful memories, and that must create good vibes, good chemicals in your brain.
No, absolutely. On the other hand, people use Bandcamp, where it's more equitable, right? You get paid 90 cents of a dollar. So people say, why want to go to a record label? I want to create my own, at home way to release. I put it there and I get paid 90 cents of a dollar. So
well, that's good. Yeah.
But you don't have the promotion, marketing, the exposure that Spotify provides, right? So, but definitely is a problem. It's very simple to solve that.
Simple.
If all the musicians get together and say, take the music out of Spotify. I don't want to be part of Spotify. I don't want to be part of Spotify. The Spotify go out of business. They will be forced to reach an agreement with the musicians.
Yeah, it's what it is. It's not actually Spotify so much. It's the people who own Spotify. Spotify, not for Spotify. And the people who own it are the record companies.
Yeah.
Don't, and there is this non-disclosure agreement. Yeah. So we don't know what really is going on because they have non-disclosure agreements with, there was a doco actually about Spotify. I don't know if it's on Disney or Prime or something, and it's very good. It tells you what all the issues are and how it formed and all this thing, and how they had to do deals with the big majors and stuff like that. But luckily, as I said, the guy at Universal laid it out the other week, and I'm hoping that he's going to actually do something about it. And he's the head of Universal in the whole world. The British guy. I've forgotten his name, actually.
Yeah, well, I hope it works out because it's very unfair for them. In the 80s, you form another band called the Explorers with Andy Mackay, and you release one record. Feel free to elaborate or what was the idea of releasing that album, how the project came together.
Well, when we stopped working with Roxy, we looked around, me and Andy, and thought, what the hell are we going to do now? This was after Avalon. Brian had gone off to do his solo thing again. And we thought, right, well, we'll form another band. And we called it the Explorers. Well, it didn't really go very far. It didn't really explore. It wasn't a success. But we had some amazing musicians on the album then. We had Steve Gadd on drums. We had Tony Levin on bass.
Wow.
We had Rick Marotta as well on drums. My goodness, were fantastic musicians. But, sometimes you do something and it just doesn't take off. And it didn't take off. So after a couple of years, we said, you know what? This is going nowhere. Let's just stop it. Put ourselves out of this misery and get on with other things, which we did.
But it's good to have the experience. Then some year later, well, a couple of years later, you guys released with the